Joining us from Tel Aviv is Alon Pinkas, political consultant and Israeli diplomat. Alon, last week, 4 female Israeli hostages were released. This week, it's 3 male hostages. It's interesting to observe the choice in gender, age. Is there any insight regarding how they pick the hostages to be released?
Well, at the beginning, there was some kind of a key that had to do with both gender, age, and whether or not it is military or not, and whether or not the captive is active military or not, that is. And so according to that key, the 4 female soldiers were released, then another female captive who's not a soldier, and now 3 men. But there are still not female soldiers, but there are still male soldiers, some elderly, and apparently several women still being held in captivity. What Israel does not know is, and because Hamas refused to provide that list, is who is alive and who is not.
And what do we know of the conditions of these hostages being released from more than 15 months of captivity in Gaza? I can imagine it's a long road to recovery for many of them.
Yeah. Okay. There are 3 ways of looking. I'm not a physician, obviously, but there are 3 ways of looking at this. One is the vital data the moment they were returned, and all of them came back in good medical condition. The second is the psychological and mental effects, and that would take many weeks, many months, many years before that could be dealt with, even adequately, or in some cases that may not even be the case. The third way of looking at it is to listen to their stories and to understand that some of them were held in complete solitary confinement. Some were denied food, some were denied medical assistance. Some were beaten up, although there are no signs of torture, at least on those that were released in the last 3 batches. So really, it's, we look at a young woman who's 19 or 20, she gets off a helicopter after a year and 4 months in captivity. She's smiling, her parents are smiling. It's, everyone is tearful, and you say, oh, great, she's on her feet and she looks fine. That doesn't mean anything.
Indeed, and just yesterday, actually, we saw a chaotic hostage handover between Hamas and Israel that briefly delayed Israel's release of 110 Palestinian prisoners.
Right.
This exposes the fragility of the ceasefire that began earlier this month. What hiccups do you believe we'll be seeing down the road?
Oh, many hiccups, but I'll start with your question. The scenes of chaos and mobs almost killing the 2 hostages that were released, and the Islamic Jihad activists who were supposedly circling them to protect them. That began as some kind of a symbolic show of force from the Islamic Jihad, a different militant group than Hamas. They were holding 2 hostages, one by the name of Gadi Moses, and one 29-year-old woman by the name of Arbel Yehud. They were released, unlike the other batches, they were released in the southern part of Gaza, and it was much less orderly than what we have seen in the 2 or 3 previous releases. So that in and of itself, those scenes of chaos are not the real challenges to the ceasefire. The real challenges to the ceasefire are going to be once negotiations begin on the 2nd phase. And that, according to the agreement, is scheduled for Monday, the 16th day of the ceasefire, today being the 13th day of the ceasefire. And that is not only when most of the other hostages need to be released, but that also includes an Israeli withdrawal from most of Gaza, including 2 key passages. And there is a lot of noise and static political rumblings that Israel will not, that Israel has a vested interest, rather, not seeing this through. And Mr. Netanyahu is now under is amenable to two kinds of pressure: one from the families and indeed the general public, who is seeing these releases, who is seeing the photos and the pictures emanating, and the other is from President Trump, both of which want this deal to be going through. But here's the catch. It all hinges on the durability of the ceasefire, but any local incident can be interpreted as a violation of the ceasefire. But even if the talks on the second phase hit major roadblocks, whether deliberate or not, the release of the hostages needs to continue. However, if Hamas is under the impression that Israel has no serious intention, and I'm not saying this is the case, I'm just saying if they have a suspicion that that Israel does not intend to carry out the next phase, then their incentive to complete the first phase diminishes, and then the ceasefire could very well break.
And what's at stake here then? Do you think Hamas and Israel will be able to stick to this ceasefire plan? Will they make it to stage 2?
No. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm using just one word, and I'm using it with categorically with conviction, but no. I don't see Israel and Hamas moving into beyond the 42nd day. By day 42, Israel is supposed to reduce forces. That is the letter of the agreement on the Philadelphia corridor. That's a 14-kilometer or almost 9-mile road stretching from southeast to northwest of the southern tip of the Gaza Strip. Netanyahu boasted, years ago that this is like Normandy or Stalingrad. This has critical strategic importance. And now he signed an agreement that says that Israel will reduce forces on the 42nd day and indeed withdraw completely on the 50th day, day 50 of the agreement. So I just don't see this happening, on top of which, and this perhaps requires a different discussion between us some other day, on top of which Israel until now refrained from engaging in any post-war Gaza political framework, which means that Hamas stays in power. It is not real power. It is residual power. It is not a government. It is what remains of a government. And Gaza is not Gaza. It is what remains of Gaza and the rubble, destruction, and devastation. But nonetheless, it contrasts Mr. Netanyahu's statements, melodramatic statements about eradicating and annihilating and total victory and toppling Hamas. That, if you look at the footage, hasn't happened.
That was Alon Pinkas for us in Tel Aviv. Thank you for joining us.